Welcome to Thieves' Cant, a tabletop gaming podcast with your hosts, Jeremy Shane and Chris White.
Welcome in and welcome back. It is Thieves' Cant, Saturday, August 23rd. I'm Jeremy Shane.
And I'm Chris White.
Thanks for being here once again. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Well, I don't know that I can match your level of greatness, but I would say fair. I'm fair.
Well, I need you to fake it, at least.
Bring it to your level. Okay. Hey, thanks for listening. Thanks for following at thievescantcast. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube as well, at thievescantcast. You can email thievescantcast@gmail.com. Coming up in today's episode, we take a look at the gods and religion in MCDM's Draw Steal. Another lore dump coming up in today's show.
We're dumping it.
The monsters are going to take over in our crowdfunding spotlight, and we're going to ask a monstrous question of the week as well. But first, let's check the headlines. New Unearthed Arcana just dropped this week. Did you get eyes on this, Chris?
I did get to, I got to look at it a little bit, and there was definitely one thing that came to mind.
I should have said one story, two headlines. The real headline is D&D has released New Unearthed Arcana. The editorialized headline is, looks like Dark Sun's on the way.
Looks a lot like Dark Sun. Yeah. They don't say it. Again, it's apocalyptic subclasses, but it could, the Circle of Preservation Druid.
Okay.
The Fighter Gladiator. Okay. And then Sorcerer, Defiled Sorcery. And the most blatant, Warlock, Sorcerer, King, Patron. So, again, I don't know. I've always been under the impression that they were a little bit scared to touch Dark Sun, because Dark Sun has some pretty dark themes.
Sure.
Makes sense, I guess, but who knows what's coming. But either way, they're definitely opening up those doors. I think it's great. I haven't had a chance to look at them too much. I know I've heard a lot of buzz online, complaints about the Druid subclass, the Circle of Preservation. Pretty powerful.
People are complaining?
Well, yeah, a little overpowered. I think some Twilight cleric vibes. Yes, people are complaining.
Can't believe
it took me a while to catch that. Right. Yeah, you're right. So it's kind of powerful, it's my understanding. But I haven't got to look at them in depth, so I'm looking forward to doing that.
Yeah, if you want to look at them in depth, we've got the link in the show notes, and if you want to give feedback, that is going to open August 28th. That feedback survey will hit. So we've already got new Draw Steal material in the form of the Summoner class. This has been in playtest for a while on MCDM's Patreon, but the Summoner has now hit public playtest. Everybody can weigh in. They want to know what you think of the Summoner class. This will be the 10th heroic class for Draw Steal. That core book has 9, which, by the way, I should plug our sister show, Thieves Can't Capers, if you want to know more about those classes and everything else to do with Draw Steal.
That's right.
Look for it.
That's right.
But MCDM says that this particular class is not for the noobs.
Yeah, you summoners are hard. I think most game systems struggle with them. They can bog the game down.
Well, because all of a sudden the player playing the summoner has not just one turn, they have multiple turns, so to speak.
Yeah, you better be on the point and keeping track.
Link in the show notes, again, for the Summoner packet, the feedback link, all of that. That feedback closes on September 8th, by the way. If you want to try what MCDM is calling their master class, or a master class. Do you consider yourself a Draw Steal master? Well, then maybe you're ready for the Summoner.
I'm not ready.
I am not ready either. And finally, this one kind of slipped under the radar, at least for me anyway.
I didn't see it until
Maybe
I
not
saw your
for you.
notes. No, I didn't know it.
Yeah, so WotC has released the Exodus tabletop RPG. Exodus is an upcoming video game launching on all the major consoles, all the platforms, sometime in 2026. I don't think there's a firm release date. It kind of looks like a Mass Effect job.
It looked like kind of Mass Effect meets Dead Space kind of thing going on, maybe.
Yeah, so The video game looks interesting for sure, and it was actually designed by James Olin. He was the lead on Baldur's Gate 2, Knights of the Old Republic, Dragon Age Origins, so the pedigree is certainly there.
That's a pretty good resume.
As for the TTRPG, built on the 5e rule set with sci-fi adaptations, that's probably the smart move there.
Yeah.
No need to create a new system from this or for this if it's coming from WotC. Use your powerhouse system that you've already got in place. Put those sci-fi tweaks on it. There's a couple of books out for Exodus. The Traveler's Handbook, this is kind of like your Player's Handbook. It's got your 8 origins, 4 classes with 2 subclasses each. And then for the GM, there's the Exodus Encyclopedia. This is where you're going to find your stat blocks, different items. So it's kind of like your GM's guide and probably a monster manual of sorts as well. So if you're interested in an official WotC sci-fi 5e, because, some people don't like it if it's not official.
Right.
It's only official if it comes from WotC.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's there for you.
There you go.
Hey, have I said this before? Link in the show notes.
Where can I find it?
So that's the headlines. It's time for a little creature feature in our crowdfunding spotlight. Dungeon Dwelling Creatures from Rugby Melee Games. This is on Backer Kit. Built using elements of Dungeon Crawl Classic. So if you're a DCC fan, you might be interested in this one. But here's where it flips everything on its head. 200-page core rulebook built so that players are the monsters and the GM runs the heroes.
Okay.
I'm interested.
This is the DDC for the DCC.
Yes.
I just want to make sure I'm keeping up here.
Tons of stretch goals involved here. Lots of add-ons, dice trays, T-shirts, adventures, custom character sheets, if you're interested in all that peripheral stuff. But just the core product in itself sounds pretty cool. Looks like the most popular pledge level there is about $50 plus shipping. That'll get you the print and PDF.
It could be fun, especially if it's fairly simple, something you can pick up easy. Yeah, get in there and make some monsters.
Once again, Dungeon Dwelling Creatures on Backer Kit funding for the next 13 days. This segues nicely into our Thieves Can't question of the week. Chris, if you were to play a monster in a party of monsters, what would you want to be?
That's hard. I love
I
love like an Illithid. They're fun, but a beholder, something like that would be fun.
Right.
But I mean, who wouldn't want to be a dragon? Like, I kind of got to go dragon.
If there are no limits, yeah, dragon sounds like a pretty fun choice.
And I want to be a cool dragon too. I don't want to be like a lame-o, like
No?
Chartreuse dragon or something like that. I want to be something cool.
Yeah. I think I think a troll could be fun. I want that regeneration.
Oh, yeah.
Like you can't stop me. Maybe a harpy.
A harpy.
A harpy could be fun. I mean, just imagine the role play that you could have.
All right.
Just singing poorly.
Yeah.
Off key.
Yeah.
Some of the most fun I've ever had at the table was actually playing a kobold. So I think I've got to add kobold to the list.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I love kobolds.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't even think kobolds would pick kobolds if they had a choice.
You don't think so?
They'd go dragon. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Well, the kobold would go dragon.
Yeah.
What about like gelatinous cube?
Ooh. Well, kind of a lack of self-awareness there, right?
Right. Not a lot of personality.
Right. It's like, here's an animal. You're dumber than that. So I don't know. Maybe that's a satisfying life.
Which monster would you want to play in a party of monsters? That email address again, thievescantcast@gmail.com. All right, with that, again, we are talking Draw Steel on our sister show, Thieves Can't Capers. But while that show is concentrated mainly on the game system itself, the mechanics, the crunch, we like to bring a segment into this show where we can feature some of the lore that we don't get to on Capers. I'll hand it over to Chris for today's lore dump.
Well, seems like we got to this really fast. Wish I'd done some research. Okay, so when we're talking about this, first of all, this is going to be a general overview. It's not going to get in depth, okay? So I'm not going to go through the name of every god and their sphere of influence and all these things. Okay, so it's just kind of the general approach that Drawstill and its creators have used in their world. So I know in hearing Colville, one thing you realize when he's interviewed is that there aren't a lot of concretes. There aren't a lot of solid, this is how it is. Instead, it's more, this is what this person thinks it is, and that's what they're going to tell you. But the person standing next to them might have a completely different opinion on everything.
Which means ultimately it could be anything.
Right. And so, whereas a lot of games, especially a lot of D20 games, kind of have a tendency to put things in stone, and this is just known history, and it's understood that this is how it is. I think in Drawstill, you're going to see a lot less of that. So in that way, it kind of mimics our own world, and I think that was their intent, right? You know, you can talk to two people of the same religion, and it doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to see things eye to eye. They may agree on some things, and in other things, absolutely not. So that's sort of the approach that was used here. And so everything that we talk about, you sort of have to take with a grain of salt, because you just can't be 100% sure that any of it is hard fact, but there are things that people observe. And again, there's exceptions to all of these rules, but there seems to be a feeling in Orden, the game setting, that most people believe in the gods. However, most people don't necessarily believe that they impact them on a day-to-day basis. And it doesn't mean they don't pray and ask for things, but it's kind of understood. And the gods sort of have a rule where they have to be hands-off in the world, at least directly. And so, and we can get into the idea of the old gods, which were more creators. And then, you know, the humans in particular worship these innumerable younger gods, which are a little more tied to the world, a little more active.
So if you're making a Drawstill character and you're choosing a deity, more than likely it's going to be one of these new deific figures?
Kind of, sort of. It's a little tricky because, well, here's the deal. First we need to understand that, the gods aren't acting directly. And so what they do is each god has saints. You could think of them as like an avatar of the deity, sort of, but they're not gods, but they are actually able to directly interact with the world, not for extended periods of time. They're limited in how much they can interact, but for very focused periods of time, for a very direct purpose, they can be there. And so the thing is, the average person sees these avatars opposed to the gods, right? They're not seeing the gods. And so what's interesting is it's actually fairly rare to see churches and temples devoted to gods. Oftentimes they're devoted to these saints, these figures that have appeared. And so you have various religious organizations, everything from just, a shaman who practices a solitary religion, or perhaps some type of witchcraft practitioners who have a coven that are together.
So now that's a little more structure.
Right. And then we get all the way to full-blown church organizations that have hierarchies and they're involved in politics and all sorts of things. But one overarching theme that you see through all this, it's interesting, is because, there's gods of evil, there's gods of good. Their saints reflect that. However, people always expect the church to perform certain services. Any religious organization is expected to do things. It's what they do. You're expected to oversee rituals. You're expected to provide healing. You're expected to, maybe boost the crop, make sure we have a bumper year, whatever that is. And so there's sort of an expectation that, hey, this is what churches do. This is what the church does. It's not necessarily even what the God does or the saint, right? It may be that the saint, I know one example they give is like the saint, I don't know the name, Balrog, the killer of 10,000 men, right?
Yes.
But if you're at...
What a guy.
Right. But if you're at the church of Balrog, the killer of 10,000 men, you better be able to perform a wedding. We're going to need you to...
You still got to do these basic functions.
Right. It's basic functions. And so I think in particular, there's two classes that sort of come to mind when you think about it that certainly are more religiously focused. We talked about, these organizations there are. So you're going to have acolytes who are starting out in the church, and really what they're doing is just casting magical rituals, right? And so what they're doing is very basic. They're fulfilling that role. Now, obviously, if they go off and forsake everything that, the saint that they're serving goes against, they're not going to get access to that. But by and large, they're kind of just going through the motions. When you get to censors and the
conduits,
and the conduits, thank you. This is like the next level. Okay, so these are like direct practitioners, and they are developing a relationship with these entities. They're active, they're doing their will, and it even gets into that relationship, because as those particular classes level up, that relationship goes from, the servant, the servitor, to eventually you're on a first name basis with this being. And eventually you're going beyond just a relationship. You're starting to understand how they work. And so you're starting to have the curtain pulled back a little bit. It really makes these classes interesting. Obviously, it's a different relationship than perhaps you might see in other games, or, it could be similar.
Yeah, but in this case in particular, it does underscore the scope of these character classes in Draw Steel, not just in already being a hero at level 1, but your ceiling is exceptionally high based on these 10 levels of play.
Yeah, exactly. It's a part of the world. I mean, that's what you really need to understand when you think about religion. It's a thing that's always been there, whether people believe it or not. So, you can look at it, obviously, if you're playing a censor or a conduit, this is a big part of your play. If you're not playing one of those characters, you think you might, does this have anything to do with me?
That actually was a question on my mind.
Right. And so that's a question you have to ask. I mean, they're certainly a part of the world. I mean, this is a thing you see in all RPGs, is the gods are apparent, right? And so there's not a lot of people who are just like, that's not a thing that exists, but obviously there's a lot of different opinions about them. But it's just a point of, and they give an example of just like in the real world, people may wear a talisman or a symbol of some kind, even if they're not that religious, because it ties into their heritage. This was grandma's cross or whatever it may be, whatever that symbol is.
Sure.
And so we have the same thing here. It is an ingrained part of the world. And so, yeah, it's going to be part of your part of your background or part of your history, or, part of your culture. It's interesting how this works across different species. The elves, for example, it mentions that there are human saints or heroes within the elven pantheon or the dwarven pantheon. And so they tend to cross over.
That's interesting.
It's how those experiences, those historical experiences, tied up. The elves are much more focused on heroes. This is another point I need to bring up, is there's not an overarching idea of a soul living forever. Most people believe, your soul over time after you've died just sort of dissipates and becomes one with all of creation. However, almost all of them have this idea that if you're awesome, if you live a really cool life, you're going to have some type of significant reward. And so, for example, the heroes of the elves, if you, have a life of big impact, you're going to go to Arcadia and you're going to be in this idyllic fairy land that's, it's the world that should have been. If you're a dwarf, their goal is, if you live a memorable life, you will live in the memories of their god.
Oh, okay.
And that's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
That's basically immortality for you, right? Because you're going to go on forever. And so it's a different view. There's not this idea that souls are necessarily eternal, but there is an idea that if you're pretty cool, then it could be. And so, that's a little extra motivation for a hero. Maybe if you live a good enough life, maybe there is something after this.
How do the 7 cities of hell tie in to religion in this setting?
The 7 cities have saints, just like humans. It's not that much different as it is in Orden, but in the place of gods, the saints here, they serve the 7 archdukes of hell. So they sort of fill in that role. And the archdukes, obviously, again, don't have time to listen to every petition or every prayer. And so that's sort of where these saints of hell, as it were, sort of fit in. But it's really not that different. The idea itself is pretty similar.
Another thing I'm curious about, so a god can have multiple saints. Have you observed any instances where 2 saints or 2 or more saints of the same god might actually be opposed?
Well, I think it's certainly possible that they could be in conflict with each other. They could be in competition with each other. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with the deity they're following, right? I mean, I think, well, they might have their own personality. They're going to resemble and have the same interest as the god. Yeah, I guess I would sort of think of them in some ways as an echo, like a visible echo of the god's power, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But these saints are, as best I can tell, they're individuals. I think it's just sort of the nature of any individual to want to be superior, to want to climb the corporate ladder, as it were, I think you could have that. Again, I think it depends. And again, like, you have to understand that these answers I'm giving you are kind of maybe true, maybe not. Like, how reliable is the source that I got the information from, and how reliable of a source am I? So, the truth's out there, but it can be difficult to separate those things.
All right. So this ambiguity that is built in to this lore, how do you feel about that? You can shape things however ultimately you would like to, or take cues from your players and shape things the way that they are starting to envision them. Or do you prefer kind of that codified, rigid, set lore? Well,
I know which one's easier. If the lore is set in stone and that's how it is easier. This is a system that's a little more thoughtful. It's a little more open-ended. Yes, you can sort of reveal the truths that you want. It's probably more realistic than a system where it's just like, we know the ultimate truth, and here it is, black and white.
Yeah. One area where I feel like it is to the benefit of the director, and I think to the game table as a whole, is this is how you get out of a situation where, just to put it in D&D terms, if I'm running a Forgotten Realms campaign, there's always going to be somebody at the table who knows way more about the Forgotten Realms than I do. And I know that whatever I do, they are questioning. I know that they're judging how I handle the lore.
Right.
And I think Draw Steel is handing us a card that we can play that says, you know what? You don't know as much as you think you do.
Right. You're absolutely right. It can be intimidating. I've often thought that, to run Forgotten Realms with a group of new players is one thing. To run it with experienced players who have read every one of the novels and understand all that lore, I'm going to disappoint you. So that can be intimidating. And then with this, it's not everything is known for certain. There are a lot of mysteries out there. And, we're also in a time of chaos right now. Right, this isn't like the prosperous the prosperous kingdom is gone.
Right, I think it's literally called the time of chaos.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of these questions out there. There's things we don't understand. For example, one thing, and I don't want to get off on a tangent, but like the Titans. There are Titans that protect every one of the regions in this world. Well, where do they come from? What's their source? Because they're fascinating. I mean, these are, they run the gambit. I mean, from the Kraken, that guards, a sea region, to basically Godzilla, in another. And then another is just a unicorn. It's the unicorn, right? Yeah. And so but these things have incredible power, and they're basically guardians of each area. Well, where do they fit in? I don't know. But those are mysteries you can try to unravel, or you can just accept them as a part of the world.
The more I listen, the more I really, really like the idea of I don't need to know.
Right.
Because here's the thing. At the end of the day, for whatever game you're playing, you don't need to know any of it. But if you provide me concrete lore, I feel like I need to know it. So whenever you hand me ambiguous lore, in turn, I feel like I don't need to know all those answers. And because the game gives me permission to not have to know all the answers.
Correct. And at the same time, if you want to run your game where this is how it is and it's understood and you can do that.
Yeah.
But again, even this is subtle because it's up to character perception. Because my censor might not think that these things are debatable, right?
Sure.
He might think he's pretty much got the answer, and maybe he does. But whatever the case, just as the viewpoints on these different facets of religion are affected, so is just the fact that it's ambiguous. Even that's up for debate, right? Well, you know what? Maybe there are some truths out there. Maybe they can be known, and you just don't like what you're hearing. So it's interesting. Again, I think it's an attempt to try to mimic how these things impact our world, society as a whole. It's wide open, so there's framework there. There's certainly an impact by these things. They're real, so it's just the players and the director have to figure out on their own how they're going to approach it.
How will you approach Draw Steel's lore, in particular in terms of gods and religion? If you've got thoughts on anything you've heard today or something you want to share from your own game, please drop us a line, thievescantcast@gmail.com. Chris, thanks for the lore dump today.
Well, you're very welcome. I don't know if I told you anything, but...
And thanks to you, as always, for listening. Don't forget, later this week, Wednesday, we're back with Thieves Can't Capers, taking a closer look at Chapter 3 of Draw Steel. We're going to get into backgrounds. We're going to talk culture. We're going to talk careers. This chapter is deceptively robust. So that's coming up later on in the week. I think we're cashed.
We're done. We've dumped. We've lore dumped. There's nothing left.
Hey, have a great week of gaming, a great week of life, and we will see you next time on Thieves Can't. I'm Jeremy Shane.
And I'm Chris White.
So long.
Thank you for listening to Thieves Can't. Email thievescantcast@gmail.com.